Hello everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be looking at the 824 support tier list. As always, if you enjoy the content, be sure to like and subscribe. That helps other people find it so they can get some good, in-depth insights into different aspects of League of Legends, primarily support, but we offer lots of other content on the channel as well. If you didn't check out my patch notes video, be sure to check that out as well. I have it linked right here in the Google Doc, which you may find in the description. And for each one of the entries that I'm going to talk about, I have a little mini guide within another Google Doc in the big Google Doc. And this will tell you, it'll give you a link, first of all, to the stats about the champion and more information if you're interested in that. Has a rating system for the champion. I rate them on a 1 to 5 scale, 1 being one of the worst champions at that role, at whatever that task is, 5 being one of the best. Lane pressure is how likely is the champion able to get priority and harass in the lane. Kill threat is how likely is the champion able to get a kill in the lane. Safety is how safe is the champion from ganks. How well can they position in team fights later on as well. Scaling is how well does the champion perform over time. And then reliability is how consistent is the champion. How likely is it that someone can play the champion at a high level over the course of multiple games. Now, lots of things come into that, but the primary things that I'm looking at are how difficult is the champion mechanically to play. How difficult are the decisions to make on the champion, and then how well does the champion fare in the current meta? So are there a lot of other counter picks out there that play into the champion? And then we have recommended runes and recommended items. This will, of course, change depending on the game situation, so be sure to think critically about what you're choosing. This is just a pretty good template to start with, and then if you need to deviate a little bit depending on the game state, you can certainly do that. Now, one thing people might notice is my mic is not quite as high quality as it used to be. That's because my Blue Yeti mic, my slightly more professional mic, is like $130. Ended up dying on me, which sucks. But I've just got this little $30 headset mic that I'm running with now. I think it sounds okay, but it's just not quite as good as it was. So I'm going to get a replacement mic sometime, probably over the next week or so, if you're curious why the audio might sound a little bit different. And I'm going to be a little bit quieter as well, because this doesn't have natural gain to it in the same way the Blue Yeti does. And because the audio quality is not quite as high as one of those more professional grade mics, then there's just going to be a slight soft little almost whispering in the background. So I don't want to turn the gain up too high, because that can get really annoying and really loud. So you might have to turn your volume up just a little bit on your headset or on your phone or whatever you're listening to, a little bit more than usual. So I apologize for that. But let's go ahead and get in here. So the major adjustment on this patch was a nerf to Dark Harvest. I don't think anything else in the patch notes really changed the meta up that much. You know, they nerfed Irelia a little bit. They nerfed Akali a little bit. They nerfed Aatrox a little bit. But I really don't expect it to make a huge difference in the overall meta with some of those nerfs. Those champions are still going to be too strong. They're going to require more nerfs. But Dark Harvest is meaningful for a couple of reasons. Number one, in the laning phase, there's a lot less damage early on in the game. So they took the Dark Harvest damage from 40 damage all the way down to 20. It started as 50 on the patch. They hotfixed it to 40, and now it's 20 base damage and then 5 per level. So it's a lot less damage. That means you're a lot less likely to get fully bursted from like 100 to 0 by something like Zyra or Brand or Jen or Misfortune or some of these other champions that were taking Dark Harvest previously. So that means that squishier champions are going to be stronger now, like Sona, like Nami, who are already statistically very strong. I think that enchanters fared really well in this patch. A big part of that is the way that they scale. So that's one thing that I haven't heard a lot of other content creators talk about as much in respect to the support role. But now you can take those shards so that you're almost always guaranteed to get 20 AP early. And you're able to get 5 armor early most of the time. Or magic resist if you're against something like a Zyra or a Brand. Now, this hugely benefits champions that can harass early, obviously, because they can really use those stats, versus something like Braum or Tom Kinch that are much more sort of passive defensive supports a lot of the time in the laning phase. There are situations where you can play them aggressively, but not quite as much usually. They got kind of screwed over by these shards because you can't really use armor to get a huge advantage early. Like, a little bit, right? But not as much as you can harassing with high AP values. And so that's why champions that have really good harassment early are going to be stronger now, particularly enchanters. And don't forget that enchanters also scale really well with AP, because AP not only goes into the base damage of an ability, but it also affects the shield strengths of those champions, and that shield strength, of course, plays into some of their key items that give the plus healing and shielding. So, for example, if you have something like a Janna shield that is, 200 base, that's not exactly what it is, but just for easy numbers, let's say it's 200 base, and then let's say that you have 50 AP, and then let's say you have plus 20% healing and shielding. The 200 base, you get the conversion rate, the 50 AP. Let's just say it's a 100% conversion rate for easy math. You get the 200 plus the 50, which is going to give you 250, and then you get that additional 20%. So that's going to give you an extra 50 for a 300 shield. So in other words, all of these stats stack multiplicatively with each other. That's why AP, early AP is disproportionately very, very good on enchanters because they can use it to harass early, and it also scales with a later stat that they have in the plus healing and shielding. They even outscale most AP champions because they have that multiplicative, multi-layered scaling. The base spell plus the AP plus the plus healing and shielding. There are very few items that give like plus overall percentage damage, for example. In the same way that plus healing and shielding works. That's why enchanters were so overpowered in 2017 for a lot of the year. It's just because the stat plus healing and shielding is ridiculously strong with champions that also have pretty respectable AP ratios in their kits because of the multiplicative nature of the scaling. And don't forget that plus healing and shielding also applies or stacks multiplicatively with armor. Not multiplicatively, but... well, yeah, I guess multiplicatively. So what I mean by that is if you give somebody that 300 Janna shield that I just talked about, if they have 100 armor, it's actually going to take 600 damage to mitigate that shield because the shield gains the armor. So 100 armor is going to reduce the damage by 50%, and so you would have to do double damage with your Janna ult, or you'd have to do double the damage of the Janna shield to completely negate it. So if the damage gets reduced by 50%, you would need to do 600 damage in order to break the 300 shield. So you have base damage, or base shield rather, you have AP ratios, you have plus healing and shielding, and then you have the fact that it works with armor and magic resist rather than against armor and magic resist. So if you're dealing 300 damage as Zyra, for example, and they have 100 magic resist, then you're actually only going to deal 150 damage. Whereas if you give a 300 shield with something like Janna, it's going to require, and someone has 100 magic resist, it's going to require 600 magic damage to break that shield. So shielding and healing scales with armor and magic resist rather than against it. And so that gives it an extra layer of power as the game goes on. This is why historically, especially if you're new to the channel and you've never heard me explain that before, this is why historically champions like Janna, Sona, Nami have been extremely strong and had really high win rates. It's just because statistically they just scale harder than anything else in most games. So if the game drags on, they're just going to overpower everybody else historically. So the answer to that is you have to burst them down quickly. You have to assassinate them. You have to bring them out of the fight, because if Sona lasts longer than 5 to 10 seconds in a fight, you're going to lose the fight most of the time. If she gets off 2 or 3 W's in a fight and manages to heal and shield 3 or 4 people, it's probably going to be over because there's so many effective stats there. And so they've gotten a lot stronger now because things like Dark Harvest are now nerfed because it makes it that much harder to burst them out. Things like tanks are also much worse right now in the bottom lane, or those engaged tanks are worse because lane priority also matters right now. So taking those tower plates are really important, and guess who takes tower plates really well? Ranged champions. And so that is enchanters. And because you can take really favorable trades early with someone like Nami, you can just go up and just bully them, harass them out. If the enemy's playing something like, you know, Thresh or Tom Kench or Braum or these other champions, and they're avoiding your skill shots, they can just sit there and harass you behind the minion wave. If they, you know, get your AD carry down to 20% and they have to take a bad back, then you're going to be able to get a couple of plates. And that's a lot of extra gold, which fuels your massive scaling because the gold has accelerated, right? So now you're able to get your Ardent Sensor faster. You're able to get your Athenes faster, your Redemption faster. And so you hit that hyper scaling status of some of these enchanter supports much faster than you have in the past, because there's a lot more gold locked up in a centralized location in the bot tower off of those plates. So you can get the plates easier. There's less of a chance that people are going to be able to blow you up in one rotation now. Tanks are just going to get bulldozed in the laning phase. And so it's just really, really hard to fight against Sona and Nami unless you have a champion that can just one-shot them really quickly. So that's the overall change that's been evolving in the preseason, right? And so there had been kind of this Dark Harvest sort of meta where you had your Jins, your Misfortunes, your Zyras, your Brands, stuff like that, able to kind of keep up with Sona and Nami because they're able to burst them out early. But that has changed, and that shifted the power towards Sona and Nami. It's not to say that champions like Zyra can't still win, or Thresh or Nautilus can't still win. As you can see, they're still pretty high on my tier list. But that's just explaining why Sona and Nami, I think, are even a step above a lot of the other tier 1 champions. Is because the scaling is just insane. You have really good tower pressure, and there's a lot less threat. Now, if tanks ever come back into the meta, these champions are going to be like extremely powerful because, as I just explained, if somebody has more armor or more magic resist, it makes the plus healing and shielding even that more effective. And there's going to be less likely a chance they're going to be able to get to you and blow you up like assassins can. And there's going to be a front line in team fights that can help peel and extend the fight even longer. So if we get tanks coming back, which bringing tanks back is the solution to bringing 80 carries back in terms of making 80 carries stronger. I talked about that a lot in my patch notes video if you want to check that out. But they could be even better. So it's a great time to learn Sona and Nami if you don't play those champions, because the meta's looking good for them right now. And with the changes I foresee coming down the line near the beginning of Season 9, we know they're going to want to buff 80 carries. And I suspect they might want to bring back some of the tanks, and they're going to get even stronger. That's just a really quick overview of the meta. I didn't intend for it to take 10 minutes at the start, but I think that's something that just does not get explained very well on any channel, is why the enchanters are getting stronger right now. And a lot of it has to do with those factors that we mentioned. And you can see this borne out statistically too, right? If we look at win rates of supports here, now this is for Platinum Plus, it's probably even stronger at lower ranks. But you'll see champions like Sona and Nami pretty far up there. Now, Brand and Zyra are pretty far up too, because that damage, I mean, things like Dark Harvest are really good. These champions can also take a combination of Ultimate Hunter and then Presence of Mind and Coup de Grace, so their ults are going to be up a lot more. And they obviously benefit really heavily from having the 20 extra AP early on as well. So the enchanters benefit from that, but so do the AP champions. And games are just a lot faster right now too. So I think it really is enchanters, and then Zyra particularly. Brand does win a similar amount. I just think Zyra's better in almost every situation. That's why Brand is lower on my tier list. But those are really going to be the champions where you're going to see things like tanks start to fall off. I haven't really explored Malachi. He has a really low play rate, decent win rate. I haven't looked at Zillion as much either. I still think that champions like Nami are just going to be better versions of Zillion, like Nami or maybe Lulu. But we'll see. And then you're going to see your champions like Thresh has fallen a couple of percentage points. Your Leonas, your Nautiluses are going to be down a little bit more, around the 50 to 51% win rate. Tom Kench has fallen off a cliff. Braum has fallen down quite a bit. Rakan's fallen down quite a bit. So things that can get bullied in the early game are not going to be as strong. Okay, let's go ahead and get in here. Let's talk about Sona here really quickly. So Sona, I think, is back up near the top, and the reason is she's the best. She's like the queen of the enchanters. So if enchanters are one of the strongest classes, which I think they are right now, or types of support rather, then she's going to be really good because she scales harder than any of them, particularly after the nerfs to Janna. So Janna pretty much got gutted earlier on this season because of the shield nerfs. Remember that Sona was not affected by the shield nerfs. You know, they nerfed Lulu, they nerfed Janna, and a couple of other random champions with shields. They did not nerf the healing champions, though. And so she wasn't as affected by it. They also buffed Athene's back in patch 8.12. She is extremely good with Athene's. And Ardent Censer remained relatively untouched. They knocked off like 2% of the plus healing and shielding off of Ardent Censer. But it's already so insanely cost efficient that it's still good on her. So she's not someone who has to use Mikhail's, like a Soraka. She doesn't even really have to use Redemption, which also got nerfed by the plus healing and shielding nerfs in 8.12 because it lost 2%, but remember that it also has a 3 times the scaling of plus healing and shielding built into the Redemption. So beforehand, before 8.12, if you got Mikhail's plus Redemption, you would have a total of 30% plus healing and shielding. You would get triple value off of the Redemption active, excuse me. So you would get a total of 90% extra plus healing and shielding on the Redemption. After the nerfs, you only get 15 off of Mikhail's. You get 8 off of Redemption, and so that is 23 triple that, you get 69% instead of 90% off of redemption. So champions that had to get Mikhail's and redemption, or that was really their optimal build, which is someone like a Soraka, someone like a Janna, they got nerfed. Sona did not. So Sona is still very strong. The reason that Sona has kind of been out of the meta for a while is she is very vulnerable to all-in champions. So it's very dangerous if they have a Leona or a Nautilus or even a Thresh. And definitely if they have assassins. So she's really unsafe in that regard. But the extra AP early allows her to harass really strong. She scales super hard into the later into the game. As I mentioned, your ability to harass very well and start collecting that tower plating gold is going to accelerate your mid game. So you're going to be able to complete your Ardent Censer. You're going to be able to complete your Athenes. And she has the best 1-2 punch in the business, I think. And then she continues to scale as support. And a couple of reasons for that is she's extremely good with Ardent Censer because the not only the heal portion of your W, but the aura, the shield. If you get close to somebody, they're going to get the Ardent Censer buff. So she can very easily apply this to your entire team potentially for the Ardent Censer buff. And if you were living under a rock in 2017, you may not remember just how overpowered Ardent Censer was. Now, it's not quite to the level that it once was, but on champions like Sona, it's extremely strong still. It just hasn't been in the meta as much because it's been meta to have hard engage supports bottom for the back half of last year so that you could roam around and try to make plays in the mid game because AD carries weren't that good in an assassin meta and you were just getting bulldozed. So you would just play things like Rakan or Nautilus or these other hard engage champs that could get on Sona and kill her because the laning phase didn't matter as much because there wasn't tower plating. But now that Ardent Censer can work, so look at this gold efficiency, right? It's 2,300. If you just buff one ally at level 1, so this is you plus the ally, it goes to 3,500 gold value. 3,500 gold value. In like the easiest scenario, level 1 just buffing one other person. That's just you and the AD carry in the laning phase. Right, so we've got, what is it, 3,554 divided by 2,300. That's already 155% efficient, effectively, in the simplest of scenarios. Now, if you buff one other ally at level 18, then it's 5,300 gold total, right? So the overall gold here on each person that you buff. Now, I've done the math. I have a Sona guide where I do the math. The math might be a little bit different because I haven't done an updated Sona guide since probably July, but I think the math is still relevant because they haven't changed Ardent Censer, and I don't think they've changed Sona's numbers since then. So be sure to check that out. I think that was a donation from Megan. So be sure to check that out. But right now, even at the lowest level, you're getting, what is this, 750 gold value out of this. So this is at level 1. So I think it's reasonable to assume, you know, you could pretty easily get to 1,000 gold value out of this, probably by, like, I don't know, level 9 or so. So that's 1,000 gold per person that you buff. So if you're buffing, like, in a team fight, if you're buffing 3 people with this, what did I press? Okay. If you're buffing 3 people with this, you're effectively going to be gaining 3,000 extra gold on top of the base. So that's 5,804, right? So 5,804 divided by 2,300. It's 252% efficient. 252% efficient in a very simple scenario. It's just like you, the AD carry, and your jungler. And you just press W and put this on them. And you're already 252% efficient. Now, in a team fight, if you're able to proc this on everybody and it has 1,000 gold value on it, you're getting 5,000 gold value in addition to the base. That's 78. That's 340% gold efficient. That's like insane off the wall gold efficiency on this item. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculously strong. So just by comparison, if we look at something like, what's something really simple? Like maybe a Zeke's. Very common tank item that has been dominating the meta for the last like 6 months or so. We look at Zeke's here. The baseline efficiency is 102%. 102%. Now, it's difficult to calculate this, right? Because you're going to have a slow. You're giving 50% extra damage to your AD carry, right? So one other person. So let's say your AD carry has, I don't know, let's be relatively kind and say they get something like 200 AD. If you're getting 50% extra on hit damage, now it really goes down to 25% because this is 50% over 2 seconds, and it just refreshes whenever you reapply it. So it's really like 25%. Then, and it does magic damage. It's not AD, so it doesn't scale with like their AD abilities and all that stuff. But let's just call it AD to be generous here, right? So you'd be getting an extra 50, effectively 50 AD. ADs were 35 apiece, plus the base number divided by the cost, 2250, 182% efficient. So even calling this passive raw AD, which it is not, raw AD is much stronger because it's permanent and it scales with abilities. This doesn't scale with any abilities. Even calling this permanent AD it's only 182% efficient. Now, the Frostfire does do some damage if you stand close to people, 40 magic damage per second. It does apply as slow, so it has lots of other utility as well. But it has a long way to go. I mean, calling it flat AD is very generous. We should probably call it magic on hit damage, which I think is closer to 25 apiece. So knock off, a third of whatever that value I just came up with. But the point is, it has a long ways to go with Ardent Sensor. And remember that Ardent Sensor is always up. Anytime you can press W on Sona, you can keep Ardent Sensor buff on everyone in your team in a team fight. Whereas this is only going to be up for, however long, 10 seconds, which is a long time. But it still has a cooldown. Ardent Sensor has no cooldown. It has no chill. It always works. So on someone like Sona, where this is going to get down to 6 seconds, and then it's going to be further reduced by, 25% in the mid game, then you're going to have CDR. I mean, this is going to be like a 3-second ability that's going to keep Ardent Sensor on people for 6 seconds. So it's permanent Ardent Sensor buff on everybody. So Sona's always been good with Ardent Sensor. It's always been an insane item on her. It's just the meta hasn't quite been right for her in a little bit. She's still been good statistically, but I haven't felt comfortable putting her near the top. And then if you start looking at something like Athene's Unholy Grail, that's so good on her as well because she actually does pretty decent AoE damage, right? Like this ability right here, even at, let's say, level 3, let's say you get 3 points for the laning phase, it hits 2 other people, that's still 240 damage for only putting 3 points in this ability with a 1.6 AP ratio because each person hit is going to be 0.8. Right, now this is assuming that, actually, it's even more than that because you're hitting 2 people. No, that's correct. You're hitting 2 people for 100, which is 100% AP ratio. That's 200 with a 1.0. You auto attack them. It does 20 extra, so that's 220 with a 1.3 ratio. So if you have 100 AP, which is not hard to get to if you're getting Ardent Sensor plus Athene's, and you're looking at dealing like 300 something damage easily off of this. And so that converts over with Athene's Unholy Grail, and that doesn't include your base damage from your auto attack, which is probably going to be at least 60. So you're probably doing something like 500 damage, 400 or 500 damage, and 25% of that is getting converted over to extra plus healing and shielding off of Athene's Unholy Grail. This item that they buffed, which is also like really, really efficient. Right, so its baseline efficiency is 114, and then every 25% mana regen, you get an extra 5% efficiency. After applying the passive, okay, so after applying that to itself. So whenever you have something like a Frostfang and something like Ardent Sensor, that's going to give you an extra 100% mana regen, so that's going to give you an extra 20% efficiency. So off the bat, it's 134% efficiency. And then you get all this extra healing. Right? So it's basically every time you press your W, you're getting an extra. I mean, I just said that it's going to be over 100. If you're dealing 500 every time you Q and auto attack somebody, let's just say you're getting 100, 150 extra healing off of that. You're getting 25. Well, maybe not. Let's just call it 100. Let's just be generous and say you're only doing 400 damage before you press W every time, and you're only getting 100 extra healing. The base healing on something like Sona's W, well, it gets complicated, but 100 healing is a lot. Even if you have a heal that does 400 healing, which is insane, that's still plus 25% healing and shielding in terms of your W, which that's her only healing and shielding. So the numbers don't line up exactly, that easily. But let's say you have a 300 heal. That's a lot. Even for like a Soraka or a Janna, a 300 shield is a lot, right? So if you're getting 100, that's an extra 33% plus healing and shielding, which is valued at, I think, around 37 gold each. That's an extra 12, 21 gold value off of that. In addition to whatever that base number was, you're getting an extra, 20 AP, which is 400 gold value, roughly like 420 gold value. I don't know. What was that? It was like 1650. I don't remember the exact number. Obviously, this is not a precise science. I'm just trying to show you just how well she scales here. Divided by the base number, 2100. So you're still getting about 200% efficiency off of this item. And the more plus healing and shield, or the more mana regen you get, the more effective this is going to be. And the more damage you deal, so the more AP you get, the more damage you're going to deal pre-mitigation off of things like your Q and your auto attacks. And that's going to translate into even more healing. So it's like very cyclical, right? Like these all build on each other. That's why she scales so heavily. It's because she has these super efficient items, most of which are over 200% efficiency. They're very cheap. And her baseline stats are insane. I mean, I just showed you that this right here is, even if only 3 points in it, it's 220 damage with a 1.3 ratio. If you max this out, it's 320 plus 60. That's 380 base damage with a 1.3 AP ratio. That's on a 3-second cooldown after considering, your ultimate and how much it lowers the cooldown on your abilities. Just think about if a mage had this in the mid lane, right? If a mage read, okay, we're going to deal 380 damage with a 1.3 ratio, and it's going to be on like a 3-second cooldown. Not targeted. It just automatically hits in a team fight. You just press Q if they're anywhere remotely close to you. It's going to do full efficiency in the damage. You can't miss it. What? That's crazy. That's crazy efficiency. And remember, the more damage you deal with this, the more you get off of Athene's, right? Well, let's look at her heal. Now, one thing that I always say about the heal, and I'm going to speed up talking about the other champions. I just haven't talked about Sona in a while with the tier list in depth, so I just wanted to bring this up. And she is one of the highest win rate supports right now, and people are probably like, if you haven't played Sona, you might be wondering why. This shield right here, it's 110 healing to both you and an ally, and this is what you max. You get like 2, maybe 3 points of Q in lane, and then you start maxing your W. So 220 heal, that right there is pretty good, because if you look at something like a Soraka, she's also going to have a 200-something heal. But Soraka damages herself. Sona's heal heals herself, partially. It's got a 0.5 ratio off of that, right, because it's healing 2 people. But people forget about this shield as well. It's 125 shield with a 0.3 as well. So even if you're only healing 2 people, 125 plus 110, that's 235 times 2, right? That's 470 effective healing and shielding with 2 people, right? So 0.3 times 2 is 0.6, and then this is 0.5. So that's a 1.1 AP ratio with a 470 base healing and shielding combined. In addition to this that I described on the queue. That's a really simple scenario. That's just you and the AD carry hanging out, doing a 2-on-2. You start getting into 5-on-5 territory. Each one, like, this number goes by 5, right? So then it turns into a 1.5 ratio. And then this turns into a 0.5. That's a 2.0 ratio. A 2.0 AP ratio. You get 125 times 5. 625, and then 210. So that's 835 base healing and shielding with a 2.0 ratio on a 3-second cooldown. Okay, let's take this a little bit further, right? So what was that? It was 800, what was it, like 8? I'll just call it 850, just for easy math. It was a little bit more than 850. But 850, let's say that what you have, Frostfang plus like runes plus Athene's plus Ardent Sensor. Let's just say you have 150 AP. You're probably going to have more than that. But let's say you have 150 AP times 2, because you get a 2.0 AP ratio. So that's plus 400 plus, what was that, 850. And now you're not going to have as much plus healing and shielding with this build, but even like times an additional like 10% plus healing and shielding, or times, we'll just say it's just Ardent Sensor times 0.08 or 1.08. Where's the back? Okay, so 1250. $13.50. So you have 1350 effective plus healing and shielding on a 3-second cooldown in a team fight. This is why I say you just the enemy team's just going to lose the fight. If you get off 2 of these in a team fight and they don't blow up your team instantly, you just win. Pretty much. This doesn't include the healing off of Athene's Unholy Grail either, which is also affected by plus healing and shielding. If you get revitalized and somebody's low, then you get even extra off of it. And it also doesn't include redemption when you get to that as your third item. So that's just like insane. Like 1350 is the equivalent of like 4 Janna shields. But 4 Janna shields would probably take you, even if you have like 40% CDR and it's maxed out shields, it's still going to take you 24 seconds to get off 4 Janna shields, whereas you could get off just one of these every 3 seconds. I mean, like, the scaling's just through the roof. It's insane. Like, that's why she's so good, because she's just a walking stat stick, and you can't mess her up. You just press the buttons. There aren't any skill shots except for your ult. That's why she's so strong, is early on, you know, you can harass with Hymn of Valor, which does pretty good damage. And you have a sustain. Now, this heal is not that great early on. You have to use it effectively. I talk about how to do that in my guide. Basically, both people need to have damage on them, and ideally you do it when you're in combat actively trading so you can use the shield. But she's just super strong right now. And she has this passive as well, which the main thing about the passive that's good is you can cast this on people. The green power cord, which is what you want to do most of the time, and it reduces their damage by, if you have 200 AP, you know, by 33%, but even like early on in the game is 25%. So that's like you're not quite putting an exhaust on them, but you're putting like a little mini exhaust on them every time you cast this. Which, if you cycle through all of your spells later in the game with Sona, and you always use this, and this, you know, you can cast this probably like every 3 seconds or so. So it's just pretty much permanently going to be up. And you have an AoE, like, they increased the cooldown on this a while ago. It's 140 seconds, but an AoE stun, effectively, for 1.5 seconds on a pretty good range of 900. So she's very, very good at team fighting, but she's also pretty good at laning. She's, like, okay at skirmishing. Not amazing, but she's okay. So that's why she's so good right now. She's very reliable. It's almost impossible to mess her up because there's no skill shots. She has really high scaling. The highest, I would argue, the highest of any enchanter. She's not very safe. She can get picked off and killed. She has no dashes. She's really squishy. Her defensive stuff is very limited. So there's that. She doesn't have super high kill threat, but she does have high lane pressure early. You just want to go with Airy, especially because you can spam your abilities all the time. Airy is going to give you that extra harassment early and up to an additional 80 shield later on. Mana flow ban. She does have mana problems early. You just have to buy a ton of fairy charms. So, you know, for the first 5 minutes of the game, it can be easy to run out of mana if you don't manage your spells correctly. But after that, you know, once she starts to get like a few fairy charms, then she can be very strong because she has really high base regen. It's 11.5, so she gets a ton of value out of fairy charms. Absolute Focus provides excellent harassment early. You're able to heal yourself up with your W, so that makes that really efficient. And Scorch, you have a really low cooldown harass, so you can use Scorch effectively as well. Now, your secondary runes are something that are debatable. I have heard people, you know, talk about Shield Bash plus Revitalize, which is legit. I personally like Footwear, just because it accelerates your build. You get a free, like, 300 gold value off of not having to buy boots, which means you get your Ardent Sensor faster, probably 1 back faster. You get your Athenes faster. You get your Redemption faster. So she's really strong at 1, 2, and 3 items. Like I said, she scales harder than anybody. So she's going to make really good use of just that raw gold, that 300 gold that you get to save. And it gives her an extra innate, you know, 10% move speed when she gets those boots, which is really helpful because she doesn't have a lot of defensive tools. And then Cosmic Insight is just pretty good overall in general. You know, you get more summoners, so you can save yourself with flash more. You can flash ult to initiate if you have to. And and it's going to lower the cooldown on Redemption later on if you get it. It's going to give you that extra 5% CDR. So just a handy all-around rune. It usually has like a 375 gold value as well. So these are just both very efficient gold items. And then I recommend just Mobilities, Watcher, Ardent, Athenes, and if you're rich late game, Redemption can all be very good. I like Mobility Boots the best just because you need to be able to zip around the map and rotate to situations, and you don't want to get caught out. So you really just want to, ward and just get out of there and get back with your team as fast as possible. So Mobility Boost is pretty standard on most supports. So that's my long explanation of Sona because she's kind of skyrocketed up the charts here since I think that champions like Zyra and Brand are going to fall off a little bit on this patch, although they'll still be good. The nerf to Dark Harvest, Sona is definitely the biggest beneficiary by a large margin. Okay, let's talk about Nami here really quickly. Nami could be number 1. I just put Sona up there a little bit more just because she scales harder if the game goes later, and Sona's a lot easier to play than Nami because there are no skill shots except for your ult, whereas with Nami, you have to be able to hit your bubbles pretty consistently to be effective with her, which takes a little bit of practice because it's not like a line skill shot. It's like, it's a weird thing where it's like you aim it and it's like a zone where it lands. So it takes a little getting used to, but I think that Nami's really strong as well. So Nami is safer than Sona. One shortcoming of Sona also that I didn't mention is she's like pretty short range to get maximum effect out of her W. Because the auras, I believe, are only like 400 range on the aura. So you have to get pretty close to tag people with those auras. And when you're close, that means you can get hit by stuff, right? You can get hit by, the Zyra ultimate, Brand ultimate, just random skill shots that are just flying through the team fight. So the fact that you have to stand that close is really rough. That's the thing with Soraka, too, is where she only has, I think, like 450 heal range on her W. So that does make her a bit more dangerous, where by contrast, Nami has very far ranges. Where an Enchanter, she can cast this at 725, and it bounces. So you can bounce this off of enemies to heal allies. So effectively, if you're trying to get this to bounce from one person to the next, you could, in theory, heal your ally from like 1450 units away. Right? If you're hitting the max range, you're hitting an enemy at 725, and it bounces an additional 725 to your ally. So that means you don't have to, like, break the line. Like, you don't have to try to step out of position to heal a dying teammate as often because you can just bounce it off of the enemy and still get a pretty good heal in there. So that gives her a very far effective range in team fights. Her Tidecaller's Blessing is also 800 range, so you can stand pretty far back. And her ultimate is extremely far range. It's 2750. So, if your team starts a fight, you can fire this bad boy from, like, really far back and get it up there. So that gives her an extra layer of safety that other champs don't have. Also, all of her abilities speed people up by a significant margin. Now, it's only a second and a half, but it starts off as 60 and then eventually goes up to 80 pretty quickly, as you complete your Ardent Sensor. And then once you do Ardent plus Athenes, those items are also very good on Nami for the same kinds of reasons that they're good on Sona. You can get this up to 100 extra movement speed. So that's really good. And a second and a half may not sound like a long time, but remember that each ability triggers this. So whenever one of your champions is trying to run down the enemy, you can throw Tidecaller's Blessing on them, wait a second and a half, throw Ebb and Flow on them, wait a second and a half, and then if you have to, you can throw a bubble on them. That'll speed them up. Don't forget, if you hit allies with bubbles, it does speed them up. It obviously doesn't crowd control your ally, but it does speed them up. And I think that's something that a lot of amateur Namis don't recognize. So if you can't get in range to bubble the enemy, like they're just too far away, but your ally might be able to get in range, if you can hit the ally with the bubble, sometimes that can make the difference. And if your team runs through Tidal Wave, so if you throw Tidal Wave through your own team, then they get double that speed. So they get 120 movement speed. So, the best scenario for this is, they try to engage onto you. And remember that that's not really just, like, for running away. That's period. So if your team's trying to disengage, right? So your AD carry gets jumped on by somebody. You throw your ultimate. You knock off the person who's on your AD carry. The wave passes through the AD carry. They're going to get 120 movement speed for a second and a half to help them reposition to get further to the back line, to a safer area. So she's really good at moving people around fights. She speeds everybody up. This Tidecaller's Blessing is a pretty long slow. If someone's auto-attacking, they're going to have this active for about 2.5 to 3 seconds. So it's effectively like a 3-second slow, which also adds pretty decent damage in there. 255 damage once you get this maxed out. So that's pretty good. So that's the difference. And she has an actual hard CC. So she has this, which knocks people up for 1 second, which can, stop channels. And because it's long range, it can stop things like Jhin. It can stop things like Xerath from a really safe distance. It can, knock out a Karthus ult if you're fast enough with it. Then it can stop standard stuff like Katarina channeling an ult and just all the standard stuff like that. But then you have this bubble, which is a 1.5-second stun, effectively. It counts as a knock-up, I think, in terms of... it's weird. I think that Yasuo can ult off of this because it's a suspension. So it is airborne, but they're also stunned. So I think they can cleanse it with a QSS, but Yasuo can also ult off of it. Yasuo can ult off of your wave as well. So she has pretty good synergy with Yasuo. But yeah, just really, really versatile. Long ranges, lots of ways to speed up allies and slow down enemies, so she can really control the pace of fights really well. And her trading is best in class in the laning phase. So with Sona, your trading is twofold, right? You have to be able to cast your Hymn of Valor to trade. If they hit you back, you have to be able to cast your Aria of Perseverance. Well, that's very expensive early on. That's 130 mana, even at level 1, just to do a Q trade and then heal back up with W, right? Versus Nami has that all built into 1. For 70 mana, you deal damage to them and heal yourself. So you deal 70 damage to them, and you have a 60 heal coming back at you. Versus with Sona, in a really basic way where you're only healing yourself, you're only healing for 30. If you're only hitting one target with this, you're only dealing 40 damage. 50 damage with the auto attack increase. So you're dealing 50, healing 30 in a really basic, inefficient way. Versus Nami, you're dealing 70, healing 60 for almost half the price. So Nami's going to be able to out-attrition Sona if they just sit there and trade spells over and over again in a team fight. Or not in a team fight, but in the laning phase. Although Sona will outscale her later on. Just because she's able to affect so many different targets. But Nami does scale really well. So this is very good early on for sort of single target harassment. It does get expensive later, but it's manageable early. So you'll have time to get your fairy charms before you need to use it. And it bounces a couple of different times. So in a team fight, it's not just going to be a 60 heal. It's going to be 60 heal, 70 damage, 60 heal with some diminishing returns that are explained here. But that's still really good. If you do heal, damage, heal, then it's a 1.3 ratio. If you do damage, heal, damage, so actually it's a 1.1 if you do heal, damage, heal, and it's a 1.3 if you do damage, heal, damage. So it just depends on which one of these are activating twice. That's really nice. And she has double scaling with AP. So not only does it affect your heal and your damage here, but it also reduces the amount of decay between each bounce, right? So normally with 0 AP, it's 85% decay from each bounce. But if you have 200 AP, which you'll be in that range between 150 to 200 with Frostfang, Athenes, and Ardent Censer kind of in the mid-game, then it's no loss. It's 0 loss here, and you're getting a bonus here. So she scales really, really hard with AP. So the fact that you can get Athenes plus Ardent Censer is very good. So she doesn't want to get Redemption early if you don't have to, just because she has such great scaling off of just raw AP. Although you can get Redemption, especially later on as a third item. It's still a very good item on her. But AP is just so strong. And then AP is also very good on this as well. Well, not very good is a strong word. It's okay on her, but it's very good on the wave. And don't forget, everyone that gets bounced on by this is also going to get sped up. So you could speed up 2 allies with this as well. You can proc Ardent Censer on 2 people with this as well. So if you bounce it on one ally, hits an enemy, bounces to another ally, they both get the Ardent Censer buff. And don't forget also, if you take Aerie, if you cast Tidecaller's Blessing on somebody, that counts as an effect that targets them. It puts Aerie on them, and that puts the Ardent Censer buff on them. So, a slick trick with this in a team fight is you can use your Tidecaller's Blessing first on your AD carry. It'll put Aerie on the AD carry, gives them the Ardent Censer buff, and then you cast Heal on someone on your front line, one of your frontline divers or tanks. That will apply Ardent Censer to them, and then it'll bounce to someone else on the front line and apply Ardent Censer to them. So you can really effectively get Ardent Censer on 3 different people in fights if you sequence that correctly. If you do Tidecaller's Blessing first, Because if you do flow and ebb first, it's going to put the shield on the person that you heal. They were already going to get the Ardent Sensor anyways. And so you're losing out on one extra person you could have Ardent Sensor on if you do that. So you want to make sure you put on that Tidecaller's Blessing first and then start bouncing around the ebb and flow so you can spread that Ardent Sensor around to even more people. And I believe with Athene's, yeah, I think it triggers on the spot. So if you damage an enemy with your W and then it bounces to heal an ally, it will actually include that pre-mitigation damage that you dealt first. So when you cast that on somebody, the way that it's worded, I'm pretty sure that's how it works. You know, this is obviously what you max first. Let's say that, you know, you deal 250 damage or something like that. Maybe let's just say 300 with your AP in the mid game. 300 damage on somebody with your W first, and then it bounces. You're going to get an extra 100 heal off of that bounce because it damages and then bounces. I think it doesn't say you have to cast a new spell. I'm not 100% about that, but I think that's how it works. And so it's just really awesome then because it's bouncing around to all these people, dealing damage and healing, and you're getting all this like really quick efficiency out of Athene's by doing that. Now, keep in mind that Nami, like, this is on a 10-second cooldown versus Sona's, like, 3-second cooldown on her W. So Sona will win long team fights if they both have Ardent Sensor and Athene's. So you want to try to close it out as Nami. You want to try to CC people with your bubbles and your wave and really make sure they die quickly. You don't want to have a 10-second fight with a Sona in a 5-on-5. But I think that she's a lot better at skirmishing for the reasons that I mentioned, just because you can speed people up easier, you can slow people down, you have the hard CC of Aqua Prison, your ultimate. Sona can speed people up too with her E. It's closer range. It's only 400 range versus a lot of Nami spells, you know, as we just talked about, can be, you know, 1450 range in some cases, you know, but at least 800 on Tidecallers. So Nami just has the ability to spread that speed around to people a bit easier. But that's the differences. I think this is, you know, the number 1 and number 1A right now. They both scale really well off of the same items that are super strong right now. They both apply a lot of lane pressure. They're good in team fights. They're both pretty good at skirmishes. Nami's just the safer option, and Sona's the higher scaling option. So it just depends on, you know, what your team needs. Sona's also easier to play. So if you're newer to the game or you just don't have a lot of practice with Nami, then Sona's probably going to be a safer bet for you. I think that's primarily why she has a higher win rate, because she's just a lot more reliable than Nami is. Although Nami's not insanely hard to play, she's a little bit harder to play than Sona is, I think. Okay, so that's 1A, 1B. If you can play those champs, I definitely would. Those are probably the best blind pick champions. They do have tough matchups into Leona specifically, and then like Thresh and Nautilus are a little dicey. Zyra is kind of a skill matchup. I think that Nami performs a lot better there because she has that further range. But, you know, I think they're both pretty good. And then we'll speed this up a little bit. I don't want this to take too long, but I did want to talk about those two in particular because I think they're super strong, and I think they're getting overlooked by a lot of people right now. You know, I was looking at a couple other tiers. I was looking at Bizzleberry's tier list. I think he had them both down in, like, tier 3. He may have had Sona in tier 2. I don't remember. But I'm just like, I don't know. Anyways, he's an interesting guy. He's pretty cool. But, yeah, I disagree about that. Now, Zyra's down a little bit lower than a lot of people are going to have her. She does have the highest win rate right now. I love Zyra. She's great. I've played her a lot this week. The issue with Zyra is you get outscaled. Like, you're very good in the laning phase, but if the enemy team has a Sona or a Nami and they get a hold of Ardent Sensor plus Redemption, it's going to, or not Redemption, Ardent Sensor plus Athene's, and then definitely if they get Redemption, you're going to have a real hard time. And you're more vulnerable than someone like Nami, specifically to ganks. You do a lot of damage. You can definitely blow the enemy team up, but you're going to be a lot more susceptible to poke, and poke is getting a lot more popular. You're seeing more things like Lux, Xerath, Vel'Koz in the bot lane, Jhin. All of these are very good against Zyra because they outrange her. And so I know I always talk about Lux kind of being a troll pick and, like, you know, Xerath and things like that, but they are actually quite good against short to mid-range mages in the bot lane like Zyra. So they are not as good in a meta that where there's a ton of hard engaged champions and assassins. There's still some of that, but there's a lot more like Brand and Zyra's running around, and that's kind of how the meta has evolved, is people are playing more things like Xerath and Lux because they're really good against those types of champs in the bot lane. So Zyra is still going to be very strong. Dark Harvest got nerfed, which is going to hurt her. She can use Electrocute still in the bot lane and be very effective. And I think that Ultimate Hunter plus Presence of Mind feels really good on her. Ulti Hunter plus Presence of Mind, because her ultimate, here's the thing about Zyra, like her ultimate is super strong and you want it up as much as possible. Usually you can one-shot people if you get a full rotation on them with your ultimate, but then it's also very good in team fights. So you just kind of want it all the time. But with her build, historically, you can't get a lot of CDR because you really want to be getting Leandries, which was buffed near the end of last season. Very good for Zyra. And you want to get Morellonomicon, so that you have, that's kind of your ultimate build there right now, which is double pen items. You have Oblivion Orb plus your Sork boots, and then you finish Leandries, and then you're just like off the charts powerful. You know, as Zyra, that's like your strongest point in the game when you get that. And then because you already have bought Oblivion Orb, you're kind of priced into finishing up the Morellos. Now, some people have asked about Rylai's. They did buff Rylai's sort of. I gave it like 10 extra AP, which is not sort of. I mean, that is a buff. But I say sort of because they also buffed Leandries to where Leandries works better even if you don't have the slow proc anymore. And so there's less incentive to get Rylai's with the Leandries. In addition, she already can apply a slow with her slow plants, and her knockup applies the slow as well early on, or like that counts as a CC, right? And if anyone else slows them, don't forget that. The way that Leandries is worded, you don't have to slow them. Right? So if you're in a team fight with Zyra, dealing damage applies this damage over time. Total damage is increased against slowed or immobilized units. It does not say you have to slow or immobilize them. So if anyone on your team is applying a slow or any form of CC to anybody that you tag with any of your abilities, they're going to get the bonus damage. So in a 5-on-5 team fight, you're going to be applying the extra damage a lot just based off of the CC everyone else is applying. Everything from like Chilling Smite to, you know, just normal abilities that people have, Glacial Augment, you know, all of that stuff that your allies might have, Iceborne Gauntlet. All of that stuff would trigger Leandries for the bonus damage, even if you didn't use it. So keep that in mind as well. So that means that things like Rylai's just aren't quite as important as they used to be. It's nice, but I think that having the double penetration is going to be a lot stronger. So that's really good on her. So, and her items are expensive though, right? So remember that someone like Sona is going to be getting their Ardent Sensor at 2,300 gold. You're not going to be finishing your Leandries until, 3,000 gold. I think it's even 3,100 gold these days. Yeah, 3,100 gold. They're going to be buying mobility boots, which is 900 gold. You're going to have to buy Sork boots, which I believe are 1,200. So, you know, all of your items are going to be more expensive than their items. So whenever you're budgeting and you have, you know, somewhere around like 4,500 gold, you're going to be able to afford Leandries and your boots pretty much, and like maybe a little bit more like, you know, some other little dinky item, whereas they're going to have their completed Ardent Sensor plus Athenes with the same amount of gold. So, you know, you're going to have boots plus one item. They're going to have two items. And so they're always going to be a little bit ahead of you. So you really have to get kills. And don't forget, their items are ridiculously efficient that we just talked about. Like, I know Zyra does a lot of damage, and that's all good, but this is only 78% efficient. Now, yes, this passive adds a lot of extra power, but you're working uphill versus Sona with that Ardent Sensor that's passing out like 300% efficiency on a 3-second cooldown. So you're working uphill for sure with Zyra. So you need to get ahead early. You need to get kills, you need to take those tower plates, and you need to snowball and finish that game up before they get to 3 items, or you're just going to get destroyed. And I talked about this before in terms of the plus healing and shielding. You're fighting against resistances. So as the enemy team gets more armor, as they get more magic resist, as they just get more flat health, which, you know, obviously increases their effective health, then it's going to get harder and harder for you versus Sona, you know, people who target their own allies, Sona, Nami, they're going to get stronger as the game goes on because their allies are going to have more plus healing and shielding. It's going to get harder to burst the enemy out because they're going to have more HP. So just keep that in mind. You're on the clock when you're playing Zyra. You do not want the game to go long. You need to close, you know, in the mid game. You finish Leandre's, you finish the game. Like, that's how it needs to go down. So Zyra, yes, she has a very oppressive, strong laning phase. I love Zyra. She's one of my most successful champions of all time, win rate wise. I almost always have like a 55% win rate virtually every season with her. But she is very vulnerable in a meta where enchanters can start scaling out of control, and she's pretty vulnerable to ganks, and like, she has no escapes. So if you get camped and ganked, which is super popular right now bot lane because of the plates, you know, plates are supposed to ward off the 4-man bot, but now people can go 4-man bot and just grab 3 plates and move on and grab dragon or something. So it has stopped people from taking the tower, you know, at 6 minutes, but it has not stopped them from camping bottom and cashing in on all that plate gold and then grabbing dragons and stuff like that. So you need to be very aware you're probably going to get camped if you're playing Zyra. So very oppressive. She can get a lot of kills. She was an excellent Dark Harvest abuser. Dark Harvest has been nerfed. She can use Electrocute. Not quite as good as the OP Dark Harvest from last patch. So she's going to be very good, but just keep that in mind. However, what I was getting at is with her itemization, you can't get CDR. Before I went on that long explanation there, you can't get CDR really because those penetration items don't have CDR, and those are the items you need to get. So you can't stop and get something like a Ludens. You know, you could, but it's really bad because it's just, she doesn't need that much mana, right? Because her mana, she has 15 mana per 5 early, which is insane. I have no idea why they did this back in the day, but she virtually has infinite mana early because you're always waiting on your plants anyways, which are going to have a fairly long cooldown early. So she has almost infinite mana in the laning phase effectively. So you don't really need any mana items. It's just a waste of gold. So if you get something like a Ludens, you're actively wasting like 900 gold. It's like you're just giving the enemy back 3 of your kills if you get them, or you're going into a 3-kill debt in order to get that item. So it's definitely not worth it to get the CDR. So that means that, you know, the changes to the runing means that she can get Ultimate Hunter and Presence of Mind, which is, that means her ult's going to be up a lot. And she can get Coup de Grace, which gives her excellent execution damage. She gets a sustain off of Taste of Blood. She gets some additional scaling off of Eyeball Collector to try to keep up with the enchanters. And Electrocute, you can proc, you know, every 20 to 25 seconds really easily with her plants. So she still is in a very good spot. She has great runes. Obviously, the 20 AP is awesome on her early on. So she's still a fantastic champion. If you're really good on her, especially at gold and lower, she could be number 1, right? And definitely, if you feel confident that you're going to be able to get kills on that Sona and Nami and put them behind early, then you can definitely snowball and win some games. I just played Zyra a good chunk last week, and it just felt like it felt rough. Because if they have something like a Kha'Zix or, you know, a Talon or just Zed, anything that's really mobile that gets fed, it's very hard to deal with because you don't want to have to stop and get something like an Hourglass. It's going to slow down your damage a lot, and you're just going to die after the Hourglass is done most of the time because you have no mobility, and your abilities are on a long cooldown. So it can save you sometimes, but it's not as good on her as it is on other champions that would want to get Zhonya's. So what did I say? Zhonya's? I may have said Rylai's. I don't remember. I meant the Zhonya's. So defensive items are really bad. You don't want to have to get Ninja Tabby on her either because you're sacrificing so much damage because she scales so hard with penetration that with spell pen that you really don't want to have to deviate from this build. This is pretty much locked and loaded. Like, this is what you need to do. The only variation is, like, if you're really, really far behind, you might have to get Haunting Guys and then just start building into Oblivion Orb. And the reason for that is Blasting Wands suck. Like, 850 gold to get a component is terrible if you're behind. You know, that's another thing about the enchanters, and then I'll move on, is that, like, AP support items are very expensive. You know, not only at the top end that I mentioned before, 2,100 gold versus 3,100 gold, but the components. Like, as an enchanter, if you have to take a back, you know, and you only have 250 gold, you know, maybe you got forced out of lane, maybe your 80 carry has to back, and so you can't do anything in the lane because it's just too dangerous while he's gone or whatever. You can do something productive with that, right? You can go get a couple of Fairy Charms, which are great. Fairy Charms are a fantastic bargain on Nami and Sona early because you're so mana hungry, and you convert that mana into very large advantages because a lot of their power is gated by their mana usage early. You can't do that as Zyra. You already have infinite mana early on. You don't need Fairy Charms. So it sucks. If you have to back with 250 gold, it feels terrible because it's like, what are you going to buy? You know, you can buy a refillable potion, you can buy a control ward or two, but usually you have to come back to lane with 200 or 300 gold, and you're just losing efficiency on your backs, whereas enchanters are almost always 100% efficient because they can always buy more fairy charms because every single item they have, they buy like 50 fairy charms, right? So each one of them is actually going to have 2 in it, right? Ardent Censer has 2 fairy charms. And they can also buy amplifying tomes. So they have such versatility. Okay, it's like, do you have 125 gold? Okay, fairy charm. You have 250 gold? Okay, 2 fairy charms. Oh, you have 435 gold? Okay, amp tome. Oh, you have, you know, whatever, 560 gold? Amplifying tome plus fairy charm. Oh, you have a bit more, and so on and so on. So it's very incremental. They always get an efficient back because they have, it's so modular. They have so many of these different items or different like components that are good in different items that they're just always going to have good backs, right? To finish your Forbidden Idol off of just 2 fairy charms is only 550 gold. To finish your Aether Wisp as part of your Ardent Censer is only 415 gold. To finish Ardent Censer itself is only 650 gold, right? The same is very true for Athene's Unholy Grail. Just a lot of fairy charms and amp tomes, and so it's just very efficient. Versus on Zyra, you have to get, if you're not getting an amp tome or a ruby crystal, it sucks, right? Because that means you have to start getting blasting wands for your for both of them. They both have like the same components, just about, right? Both Morello's and Haunting and Leandre's. It's blasting wands, which is 850. Each one of them requires about 750 to complete. And then Sork boots are like 800 gold in addition to your normal boots versus the 600 gold for mobility boots. So the backs are just a lot worse. So just keep that in mind as well. Once again, if you fall behind, if you let that enchanter start to get a little bit of a lead and you're not able to get efficient backs, if you can't get that blasting wand, if you have to go back to lane with 600 gold, you're in big trouble. So just keep that in mind. That almost never gets talked about by any other content creator, but that is a major pitfall of AP supports, and I've played a lot of AP supports. I've probably played, 1,500 Zyra games my lifetime, maybe even more. That's definitely a thing that feels really bad. Okay, let's move through the rest of them. This is like an hour on 3 of them, but I do think these are the 3 that probably deserve the most press and probably are the strongest by a very large margin right now. So I would definitely, if you have any desire at all to win some games, or I guess any desire to play these champions and you want to win games, then I would play one of these 3. Like, if you can do it at all. If you hate all 3 of these, okay. But if you kind of like any of them, I would definitely play them. And remember, winning games matters during the preseason because that determines where you're going to get placed next season. I get asked about this like once per stream, usually. Well, why are you playing ranked? It's preseason. Because that depends on where you get placed. If I can get into Diamond, if I can get to Diamond 4, which there is no more Diamond 5, if I can get to Diamond 4 before the preseason starts, there's a much higher chance I'm going to get placed into Platinum at the start instead of getting placed into Gold. The same is true for you. If you're Silver right now and you can make it to Gold 4 by the start of next season, there's a much higher chance you're going to get placed in the Silver rather than getting placed into Bronze at the start of the season. So don't goof around too much. Have fun. Have a good time. It is preseason. Try out stuff. But try to win too, because it's going to help you a lot once the season starts, so you don't have to climb as much. Okay, Thresh is another one. I have Thresh up here just because he's so versatile and he's so good against Leona. So I would pick Thresh specifically against if they have something like a Leona or maybe a Nautilus or a Pyke, or your team just needs a little bit of extra engage, but primarily I have it as a sort of a safeguard against Leona. Thresh has his hooks. He has his flay, so he can stop forward movement. He can engage on people. He has his lantern to save people. Remember that Thresh was double buffed near the end of the season, and he was arguably, if not the best champ, he was certainly in top 5 every time. A lot of people called him the best champ of the end of Season 8 after those buffs in solo queue. So remember, he got 4 seconds off his hook early, so if you miss the hooks, you're not punished as hard. And then Dark Passage got buffed as well as you level it up. So it goes down to 12 seconds, which is really nice. And don't forget, this has a very good shield. In the mid game, you're going to have like 50 souls. That's a 270 shield on a 12-second cooldown. Like, that's starting to get into Janna territory, right? That's pretty good. And it basically gives your ally, not exactly a flash, but almost. So it's, and you can obviously like lantern in your allies. It's just extremely versatile. So that's the thing about Thresh is you're gonna lose in raw stats. You know, potentially you could get completely annihilated and pounded by Zyra or Sona or Nami. But if you hook them a lot, you can actually kill them too. So I think that really almost any matchup is a skill matchup where I would usually favor the Nami or the Zyra just because they're easier to win. It's easier for them to win that matchup because they're not as hard to play. But if you're a really good Thresh, you can definitely make it work. And he's extremely good against things like Leona. He just dumpsters Leona. And I think that you need something in your arsenal that's good against Leona. You can do Morgana, you can do Janna, you can do Janna, Tom Kench, but they've all been nerfed so hard. I would not touch Tom Kench right now under any circumstances. And well, maybe if you have a duo jungler and they're going to use your ult every single time to get kills bot lane, maybe. But or if it's like organized play, it's like 5-on-5 and you have specific strategies where you're really going to abuse his global ult or his semi-global ult, then maybe you can still use him. But in solo queue, I just wouldn't touch Tom Kench. Morgana feels really anemic. I just don't think she's that great with a lot of the runes right now. A lot of the itemization, I think that really, you know, stuff like Ardent Censer and Athenes are super strong right now. And she doesn't abuse those that well. She can trigger Ardent Censer with her Black Shield, but it has a long cooldown. She's okay. But I don't think she's amazing. Janna's okay too. We'll talk about Janna here in a second. But after those nerfs, she feels really bad for me to play her. Like, she gets completely dumpstered in lane by things like Nami and Sona, and I think that they even outscale her now, honestly. Like, Nami can interrupt her ultimate in a couple of different ways. Sona can also interrupt it. And they just scale better. Like, they're just way better with Ardent Censer, and especially with Athenes than she is. She's not that great with Athenes. She has a long cooldown. Anyway, so I think that leaves Thresh. So if they have Leona or some other type of, like, hard engaged champ, I think that Thresh is a decent solution. Although, once again, he's going to get dumpstered probably by AP champs. Potentially, if you're not landing hooks. It's tough against Zyra specifically because her plants block your hooks. So if she puts a plant in your face, if she, like, roots you with her E and puts that plant right in front of you, which a good Zyra will do that, then you're not going to be able to throw a hook to try to counter. You're just going to get wrecked. So, you know, play him with caution. He also doesn't scale very well. Like, he scales in the sense that he has such great utility. Like, this hook gets down to a very low cooldown. And, you know, the lantern gets down to a low cooldown too. But, like, his items, he does not work very well with a lot of items. You know, you can get Knight's Vow for, like, half value. You can get Zeke's, you know, which is okay. But your ult's on a long cooldown. It's kind of hard to, like, get close enough to hold people still if you don't land your hooks. So he is very good if you're very good on him. He's a good counter against Leona, so I think he still deserves tier 1. It's just really tough matchups into some AP champs. So just be careful with Thresh, but I think that he can still be pretty solid. They also nerfed this rune tree, so you can't take Chrysalis anymore. Demolish is okay, but you're not going to be getting close to their tower in most matchups early. You're going to be getting pushed into your tower by Nami and Zyra and things like that. So Demolish is all right, but it's not as good as it is on other champs who can apply more lane pressure. So he's all right. Another pet favorite of mine is Nautilus. I think he's the best hard engaged champ right now just because he's so reliable. And I don't want this to take too much longer. I gotta go feed my daughter here in a second. But give her a little early lunch. Because that's when they feed her at daycare for something. They feed her lunch at like 10:30 at daycare. I guess then they take a nap at noon. But anyways, I like Nautilus a lot. I prefer him. I saw this debate in the comments of Bizzleberry. Someone from this channel, I think it was Eric, asked Bizzle. And Bizzle, if you don't know him, I just started watching his channel a little bit. I disagree with him about a decent chunk of stuff, but he is higher ranked than I am. He's a diamond player, and he's got some good stuff to say. He's got some good ideas, so be sure to check him out. But Eric asked in the comments, what about Nautilus? And then Bizzle said he liked Leona a lot more. So I want to talk about why I prefer Nautilus just a little bit here, and then we'll move on. So number one is the ultimate, and this is something Bizzle said that Leona's ultimate was more reliable because it's faster. I disagree with that. First of all, Leona's can be dashed or flashed. So if you're trying to ult a Lucian with Leona, it's never going to happen if you're trying to initiate from long range. and a lot of champions, a lot of modern champions are going to have dashes. And it's not guaranteed to stun, right? So if you just clip them with the edge of it, then it's not going to stun them. It just potentially is going to slow them. Versus this, unless they have like an hourglass or a couple of other very unique things, this is going to hit them. Aside from some special mechanics, they cannot dodge this. Lucian cannot dash out of this. There's no way to flash away from it. You can put some distance between you and him, sure. Like, you can dash and get some distance and maybe flash away. It's still going to hit you. You're still going to be stunned for a second and a half when it hits you. It's a 1 second knockup, or it's even longer than that. It's a 1 second knockup plus this additional stun. So up to a 3 second stun. And that's going to give him more than enough time to line up to hit you with a hook and then auto attack you as well. So Nautilus's full chain CC, you know, is 2.5 seconds on the ult at level 11. Then he's going to hook you, which is going to be, you know, another like 0.1 for that animation. I think it's closer to like a half a second, because if you look at the animation, they get hooked, they run into each other, and then just kind of bounce off. And then he's going to hit you with this for another second. So you're looking at like 3.5 to 4 second stun on something that can't miss in most circumstances. So I think that's extremely powerful. Another thing is, I think Leona's is on a lower cooldown. This does more damage than Leona's, I believe, but it also has secondary knockups. So if you cast this on the backline in a team fight, it can hit 3 other people. It knocks them all up for 1 second plus the duration. So you can potentially stun their whole team for 2.5 seconds. That's like casting a Malzahar ult on 3 people in a fight, effectively. Which is mind-blowingly powerful. Like, that's so strong in a team fight. So Leona's doesn't do that. It's like, yeah, you can, you know, with her, whatever it is, her radiant, her ult, right? Like, yeah, you could maybe stun a lot of people, but it's a lot easier in a team fight to hit multiple people with Nautilus's ult. And it's like gonna knock them up, right? It's not a slow, it's a 2.5 second knockup. So that right there is very strong. So that's where we disagree. I think this is much more reliable than Leona's because you can't flash or dash out of it. It's going to hit you. And even if they have Hourglass, you might say, well, if they have Hourglass, Leona's better. They can Hourglass Leona's ult also. They have plenty of time to do that. So I think that's a moot argument. So the thing that's good against Nautilus's ult, Hourglass, is also good against Leona's ult, Hourglass. Okay, the other argument is that, you know, she can engage through a minion wave that Bizzleberry was giving. That is true. But her engage is much shorter, and it's a much more slender hitbox. The hitbox on this is absurdly, like, it's comically large. If you throw this at somebody, you're hitting them, probably. Like, it's a huge hitbox. I don't know exactly the pixels. It doesn't tell you what the hitbox is here, but it is massive. Massive hitbox. It is really hard to miss this thing. And the animation is so fast. It's like, boom, there it is. And I think Leona's Zenith Blade is not, it might be 1100, but I feel like it's a bit shorter than that. So this is massive. Like, it's so much easier to hit open field, although you can't do it through minions. You can just walk around the minions, and there's a good chance you're going to hit them with it. So that's one thing. I think that's kind of like a push. You know, Leona's is better through a minion wave in that respect, but Nautilus is better open field. Nautilus is safer, too, because don't forget, he can hook walls. He can get out of tough situations. So if you're pushed up with your AD carry and you see a gank coming in, and you're just like, oh, crap, and your AD carry is, you know, Ezreal or Tristana or something, and they can get away, and you're Leona, and you can't get away, you're probably going to die because you have no way to run away from that. Nautilus, you basically have an 1100 flash. Now, they can interrupt this with various things, but you can pretty much get out of stuff at 1100 range by hooking a tower or a wall or something like that. So don't underestimate that. That is very, very strong that you have an escape as an engaged tank, because not many engaged tanks have that. Rakan is like the only other person. He's not a tank, but he's like a hard engaged champ that also has an escape. Alistar doesn't have that. Leona doesn't have that. A lot of people don't have that. So that makes you inherently safer, so you can push up in the lane and potentially threaten some of those plates without as much risk as some of the other hard engaged tanks. So that's an advantage that he has. And the final thing, speaking of pushing, is he can actually wave clear, which is very, very valuable as a tank. Right? Especially in the bot lane, right? Because you want to be pushing them in a tower, getting their plates if you can. Or sometimes just in solo queue, like your team just won't push the wave and you just need to push it, right? Maybe there's a wave up near the tower and you need to push it out so you can go contest Dragon, or so you can go get Vision for Baron or whatever, and you don't want to have to wait on the mid laner who just backed before pushing the wave. You don't want to have to wait on that person to come up and help you wave clear. So the fact that he can wave clear is really strong, and he does really heavy AoE damage in fights. You know, if the fight goes on for a little bit and he starts spamming this, you know, it's up to 350 damage per target, and it's on a 5-second cooldown. So, you know, and I think that their W, like, it's similar tankiness. Like, she might get a little bit more, although I think that's debatable. It depends on your itemization and stuff like that. But, you know, I think that he is definitely, I think he's better because I think he's a lot more reliable. He's safer. He has wave clear. So I would much prefer Nautilus to Leona right now. But, you know, I could definitely see an argument for Leona. I do think that Leona is strong. So on Nautilus, just your standard Aftershock. I prefer to do footwear and Cosmic. I like the 300 gold off of footwear. You know, you can do something like Hex Flash if you're making good use of that. But I see very, very few supports actually use that well. So maybe like in Challenger, Hex Flash is better, but I think footwear is just guaranteed value. I'd probably rather go for that. He's a very good Zeke's user too. Leona is also, but they have short cooldown ults and they want to get into combat and stick on people. So I think he's the best engaged champ right now. Now, he can't hook through walls, but I think a lot of times, especially on someone like Leona, hooking someone over a wall can get you killed just as much as it like can be a good play, because your team may not be able to follow you, you may not have proper vision, and you might just die doing that. So I think that's kind of a moot point when we're comparing Leona. Like someone like Blitzcrank, his hook is going to be better because he can like pull people through walls, but Leona has to go over the wall. So anyways, I prefer Nautilus, but I can definitely see an argument for Leona. And just I just mentioned Leona, so I'm going to just, well, I'll talk about Rakan just to do it in order really quickly. But we need to get through this. I don't want this to be too long. I know I said that, and it's going to be like an hour and a half, but Rakan still going to be strong. I think that he has more problems than I thought he was going to have on this patch after playing a little bit with him. The issue is, like, he can get bullied so hard by anybody. Name your champion that's in the meta right now, and they're probably going to bully him out, like, super hard in lane, right? So, like, Zyra, Nami, Sona, like, Brand, Vel'Koz, Xerath, Lux, Jhin, Misfortune. I mean, anybody is going to bully him out. Maybe not Ezreal, but like just to throw a jab at Ezreal there. But everybody's going to bully him out. So like in theory, he has good AP ratios, right? You know, like his shield has a 1.6 ratio. In theory, you know, his Q has a 0.7 on the heal and a 0.6. The problem is he's just so unreliable in the laning phase. Like hitting these Qs is so hard against competent enemies. And even if you hit him, it's not going to do as much damage as a Nami. It's not going to do as much damage as a Zyra. And so the 20 AP is really not nearly as good on him as it is on things like Sona, Nami, Zyra, because he can't leverage that strength early on. And he's just going to get bulldozed. He's already not great against those champs before level 6 unless you get a gank. Now, yes, level 6, he can engage and like do a lot of work, but that's a problem. And then also, like, his best build, the Guardian build from the last iteration, is not that great anymore because he doesn't have Chrysalis. So Demolish is bad on him for the same reason that it was bad on Thresh that I mentioned before. It's not optimal because you're going to get pushed in. You're not going to be able to take advantage of that to get plates most of the time because you're bad in the laning phase. So, you know, that tree is pretty bad. I mean, you could get Shield Bash. I don't think that's great on him either. So that's kind of a useless tree. The bottom tree in the Resolve tree is not that great either. You can get Revitalized, but most of the time you're rushing Zeke's on him. So you're not going to be able to like get very good usage out of Revitalize because you're not getting plus healing and shielding until you get Ardent Sensor maybe as your second item. And so Revitalize is not that great. And both of the other things down there are terrible too. And Bone Plating is like okay, but I would argue it got nerfed. At best, it's neutral from where it was. So now you have two really bad trees. So Guardian's good. Bone Plating's okay, but the other two are terrible. So you really can't go Guardian anymore on him. So if you go Unsealed Spellbook, that doesn't fix your laning problem. Unsealed is good in the mid game when you can really abuse some of those extra summoners, but in the late game or in the early game, you're still going to get bulldozed. So that kind of leaves you with Airy, which is what you have to take, but it's not great early because Nimbus Cloak doesn't matter if you don't have your ult. Absolute Focus, you're not going to be over 70% because you're going to be getting harassed down. Scorch isn't going to matter because you're going to lose the trades. You know, Airy, you're not going to be able to abuse people with Airy very much early. Because once again, you're going to lose trades. So he just really, like, he's just, there's no way of getting around just him just getting murdered in laning phase. Like, he's good later. If you can make it to 6, if you have a lane-dominant champion and you need hard engage on your team, so you have something like Jhin, or Draven or something like that, and you're like, man, my team really needs hard engage. I want to be able to scale well with Zeke's plus Ardent Sensor. I think I'm going to go Rakan. Like that's the situation where you can go Rakan. But if you have a Vayne or an Ezreal or a Twitch or, you know, just some other champion where you're in a losing lane already, it's going to feel really, really bad. So he is good against assassins. That's one thing. If they have a Zed or a Talon, because you can go Zeke's early versus someone like a Nami or a Sona who really doesn't want to have to get that item first, then that's where he's strong. It's like, okay, they have an assassin. We have a strong lane. I want to be able to play around that assassin better in the mid game. All right, I'm going to take Rakan. So I still think there's a place for him. I still think he's good. I just knocked him down a little bit here just because he's so weak in the early game. He's still good against assassins, but the early game matters so much more, and he just can't leverage that new 20 AP that a lot of the other champs get. So I think he's good, but he's definitely fallen down a little bit. I think that this is probably the best build, the Airy, Nimbus, Absolute Focus. I know I said it's bad in lane, but it's still great later on in the game. And then Scorch, Footwear, and Cosmic. And then Nomad, Ionian Boots, you could sub those out for Mobility Boots if you prefer that. And then Zeke's Knight's Vow or Ardent Sensor. There are a lot of different items you can get on him. It just kind of depends on the game situation. Check out my guide if you want more info on that. Just because I want to speed up here. Leona, talked about Leona a lot. I'm just going to breeze through her really quickly. I just think Nautilus is a better version. But Leona does have a, in the laning phase, you can go through the minions. You can bully people out if you get ahead, if your jungler's camping for you. You know, and you can manage to keep the lane in the middle if your AD carry doesn't push it. That's another thing with Leona. Is like if your AD carry pushes, you can never engage or fight because you can't dive under tower early on. And so you're just going to kind of be worthless. Also, if you're losing the lane really hard, if you're behind and they're pushing into you, it's hard to engage into too many minions or you're going to take too much collateral damage. So you really have to have this Goldilocks scenario where you're like, you're on point, you're either winning the lane or you're even, and your AD carry is keeping the lane in the middle, which means you're not taking plates, which is not great if your other lanes are losing and you need to try to hard carry them. So it's just like a real Goldilocks scenario. If it's perfect, if you have perfect wave management, if your AD carry like knows what's up, you have a preferable matchup where you can really get a hold of that squishy enchanter and kill him over and over again. If your jungler is camping for you, or at a bare minimum, the enemy jungler is not camping you, you get ahead 2 or 3 kills. You have an aggressive AD carry that can leverage that advantage early, like a Jen, a Draven, something like that. Then yes, she's great. And she is on paper a counter to Sona and Nami. But I just think there are a lot of things that have to go right with her. And I think that Nautilus is just going to be better in more situations. Yeah, I think he's just a lot more versatile. But, you know, Leona is still pretty strong. She can still work. Janna, we'll go through this pretty quickly. I think that, you know, I talked about her earlier. She's okay, but she got hit harder than almost any other support in terms of the 8-12 nerfs, and then they nerfed her again fairly recently. I don't remember what they nerfed about her. I think it was her W. I know they've nerfed her shield a ton. She's just terrible in the laning phase, honestly. Like, compared to some of these other champs, like, yeah, she could bully out a Braum or a Tom or something with, like, W spam and auto attacks, but Sona and Nami are going to bust her up in the laning phase because they have a heal, and they just have much better scaling early. Her shield starts at an 18-second cooldown, which is ludicrous. So you can't trade if that shield's not up most of the time. So yeah, I think that's just going to be worse. Her ult is on a much longer cooldown. It's 150 seconds. Both of them can interrupt her ult. They just scale harder just in terms of raw, like how well they interact with Athenes, how well they interact with Ardent Sensor. They're just going to be better. She can put it on one person, right? With her E. She can put Ardent on one person. We've already seen Nami can put it on 3. Sona can put it on 5. And you might think, well, 5 people can't use Ardent Sensor. It's like, yeah, but everyone's going to auto attack. Right? Even if it's like you're Ardent censoring the Orianna or something in a team fight, she's still going to auto. Like, it still has some value to it, right? So, and then, like, she's not putting out enough damage to really, like, super leverage the Athenes. Certainly not as much damage as Sona and Nami in a team fight. So, she just can't really use those optimal items. Historically, she's really needed to get Redemption plus Mikhail's or Redemption plus Locket, and those builds just aren't as good as they have been in the past. So I think the items are working against her. I think the runes are working against her. She can still get Airy, but she doesn't use Airy as well as Sona or Nami. So she still wins. I mean, she's probably got like a 51% win rate or something. Yeah, so it's not like she's terrible. She's good. She's tier 2. I just think that Sona and Nami are better. Now, if you have to pick an enchanter, you really don't want to pick something like Thresh into Leona. You can do Janna. It's still a pretty decent matchup. It's certainly a better matchup than Sona and Nami into Leona. So that is something that, is on the table. Also, if you have a hyperscaling AD carry that benefits heavily from the AD and the Ardent Sensor, and you just need to peel them, and you're just going to win. If you have something like a Vayne, or you have something like I don't know, God forbid, a Kog'Maw or something like that, and you're just trying to like scale for late, then she can work pretty well, but she's going to get busted up early, and I think that makes her really vulnerable in this meta compared to some of the other enchanters that have a lot more game early on. Soraka's another one that people mention a lot. I think Soraka is very good in specific situations. So if you're going to be able to bully your lane, if they have a weak laner, if they have something like a Vayne or an Ezreal, or maybe even like a Jinx, maybe a Sivir, something like that. Then you can get away with Soraka. She's pretty much like, you're really, really strong in the laning phase as long as they don't have a hard engaged support and they can't blow you up, so don't pick her into Leona. But she's pretty good into things like Sona and Nami early on if you hit your Qs. So if you hit your Qs, your Ws are going to be more efficient than their heals early on. You're going to be able to apply like pretty good harass. She can get ganked and killed easier than any of them. At least Sona has a speed up with her E. I mean, Soraka, if you hit your Q, yeah, you get a speed up and maybe you can run away, but it's a lot more conditional, and she's definitely a lot more dangerous than Nami. Remember, she has close range, 450 range, so that's going to be really rough. And the plus healing and shielding reduction is extremely strong on her. So Grievous Runes is really strong against her, I should say. So like Morellonomicon's very, very popular right now. Almost every mid laner is going to get that at least as like a third item at the absolute latest. Most AD carries that have any kind of brain are going to get an Executioner's Calling against Soraka early, and she gets really, really hurt by that. Sona doesn't get as hurt. Yeah, it hurts her healing, but a lot of her effectiveness are also her shields. Same thing with Nami. Yeah, it's going to hurt her healing a little bit, but she still has all of her CC, her slows, her other utility in her kit. Really, Soraka's like 90% of her power is her healing. Like, her silence is okay. It's a point-click silence, but it's not a hard CC. And that's her only CC. So it's good at like interrupting things or like being like annoying at very specific points, but it's not the same as hitting a bubble. It's not the same as a Sona ult that like stuns 4 people in a team fight, And so like Soraka just gets blasted by Grievous Wounds a lot more than the other champs. And she's a champion that really needs to get redemption a lot of times. She needs redemption. She needs that extra health healing unless you get a Water Dragon. A lot of times she needs a Mikhail's. Because she needs that health regeneration because her healing hurts her. So, she can be very good, especially if you have a couple of tanks on your team where that healing is going to be very, very effective because they have a lot of armor or magic resist, like I talked about earlier. How powerful healing is if your team has a lot of resistances. But it's just a lot more conditional. It's a lot more ifs. Like, you can win with her, but be very careful. You're probably going to get camped. They're going to get Grievous Wounds. That's going to be rough. But if your team has organized 5v5 team fights, you have a couple of big frontline tanks that can peel for you, and you're going to be able to heal them up, she can still work. She can be strong. So I wouldn't blind pick her, but if you really like Soraka, I think the meta is better for her now than it has been in a long time. She does use the extra 20 AP very well early on. She can harass really well. So I think that Sona and Nami are a little bit more consistent than she is. They have a bit more utility. But she can be very good. And also having that ultimate is a very good counter to Karthus, who is very popular right now. So that's an extra bonus. Yeah, she's okay. All right, Pyke is the last one I'll mention. A lot of tier lists might have him up at tier 1. I just think he's too vulnerable. Your all-in rotation forces you to like get into hand-to-hand combat with the enemy a lot of times. And if they flash your E or they dash away from it or whatever, or you just miss it, you're probably going to die. Like you might be able to E back or you might be able to W and run back out, but if they CC you, you're going to die. So, like, yeah, your hook is nice. It requires a wind up. It's pretty predictable. You can kind of dodge it. It's probably on par with, like, Thresh in terms of difficulty to land, maybe a little bit more difficult. But the fact that you not only have to hook people most of the time, but also use your E to stun them means you have to use 2 abilities. And it puts you in great danger to dash forward like that if you're not Tank Pyke, and they nerf Tank Pyke. Like, Tank Pyke I thought was tier 1. But, yeah, you do more damage if you get something like Ghost Blade or Dust Blade. But remember also that you do 0 damage if you're dead. And so, if you try to go in like that and they peel you, You know, if the Nami, you try to engage and the Nami like uses tidal wave and, you know, knocks you up and like stops your AD carry from going in, and then she bubbles you, heals the AD carry with her wave, and then puts the slow on him so that you can't run away, you're going to be in a world of hurt. So yeah, if you hook these enchanters and you get some kills early, yes, very strong. You know, you get your Duskblade early, you've got Ignite, you get those ult resets. Yeah, you can snowball the game really hard. I just feel like it's very risky. Now, he is relatively safe when out roaming because you have your E that can go through walls, and of course you have your speed up and your invisibility with your W. So he's probably the best warder in the game because you can roll up and ward their jungle with mobility boots while you're invisible, because remember, setting down wards doesn't break invisibility. So that's extremely good. So he has, like, nice utility. I just think he's so squishy, and he has to get so close to do his combos. You can hook people without going in with your E. It takes a lot of discipline to do that, kind of like not following a Thresh hook. That's bad. I don't know. I just think he's just too squishy. He kind of runs into like the AP problem too, where his items are expensive, so he's just going to get outscaled, you know, and he has to buy these lethality items for like 2,900 gold each, and the enchanters are all getting to buy their items for like 2,100 gold. It's the same kind of Zyra conundrum, where it's like, you're going to fall. If you're not ahead, you're falling behind. I know that sounds obvious, but it's compounded by the fact that your items are expensive. And it kind of like Zyra, if you go back to the shop and you can't buy long swords, you're kind of out of luck. Or you can't complete that dirk, that serrated dirk, you're out of luck. Now, it's a little bit better than it is with Zyra, because at least you can buy long swords for 350 with almost everything instead of having to buy blasting wands. But it's still not the same as being able to buy fairy charms with someone like Sona or Nami. So he's okay. I just think a little more dicey, a little more risky. So powerful in many compositions, just not, I wouldn't blind pick him. Leona's obviously going to trash him. You know, someone like a Leona or a Nautilus, like a tanky champ with a lot of CC, is going to dumpster him too. Now, those aren't like, Leona's pretty popular. Nautilus is not so much, but something to keep in mind. All right, Blitzcrank. Tier 3, you know, he can be good. I just would rather play Nautilus or Thresh, depending on what I need. He just doesn't have enough utility. Like, yeah, he has the most damage and he has the best hook in terms of raw offensive power, but he just doesn't have a lot of utility, right? His ult is, like, super short range. If you don't hit your hook, you're basically worthless. So, you know, if you hit your hook a lot, it's great. It's all good. If you miss it, you're going to get dumpstered. Because, like, if he misses the hook, he can't do anything else in lane. Right? If you miss your hook with Thresh, you still have your Flay, you still have your Lantern, you still have empowered auto attacks. Like, you can still kind of, like, hold people off when they try to go in and harass you. Or Nautilus, you miss your hook, you still have your stuns on your auto attacks, you still have your E, you still have your shield. You know, you can still kind of, like, fight back if they engage on you. But, like, Blitz, if you miss that hook, you are worthless. They are going to come up and pound you for 20 seconds if they know what they're doing at all. So he's okay, but it's rough. Braum is very good with Lucian. That's why I have him up here as like a peeler tank that's still okay. He's still great in team fights. His itemization is pretty bad. The runes hurt him a lot because you're going to get pounded with that extra 20 AP in the laning phase. The extra little bit of magic resist is not going to fully compensate for that. You don't scale very well. Most of your abilities don't have, you know, a ton of extra like scaling with armor or health. There's a little bit, but you're just really not scaling that well as the game goes on. But, you know, your base health, the base power of your shield, you know, that's all very good. You know, your passive, just being able to stun a lot of people in team fights, that's all very good. But, you know, I think that he's okay. I just don't think that tanks are that great. Alistar, same thing. He has a hard engage, but you're very vulnerable when you go in. And I just don't think he has as much utility in, like, Platinum and lower as some of these other champs that have longer range engages and, like, just have more utility. You know, like with Thresh Lanterns, you know, things like Nautilus's ult, which can CC a lot of people. Alistar's ult just protects himself. So Alistar is great for, like, starting a fight in a 0 gold economy where you have no items like Challenger or Pro Play or Tower Dives. So Alistar and Braum are what I call, like, 0 gold champs. They're very good in Pro Play where there aren't a lot of kills and the support's just going to have no gold. You just basically get mobility boots, your tier 3 ward item, and just buy control wards for the rest of the game, and that's it. Which is how a lot of pro games are, versus like solo queue where each team, you know, might have 40 kills. Then someone like Sona, who is super powerful on 3 items, or Nami, are going to be a lot stronger. So it really just depends on, that's a major thing, is like the gold economy from Challenger down to like Silver or something, where something like Alistar is going to be very good in Challenger and very poor in Silver. A lot of it is because of the gold economy, among other things. You know, having to coordinate really tough engages versus Sona just standing around and pressing Q and W in fights and not dying, and you win. It's just a lot harder to pull off. Lulu can still be good. She does get dumpstered by Nami early and Sona to a lesser extent, but she does have a lot better game against assassins, so you can ult people to protect them from assassins. You can polymorph the assassins. So she's pretty good if the enemy team has a lot of assassins and they don't have a Nami or a Sona. She's going to get dumpstered by Zyra as well. And she's very good with like Twitch in particular and Kog'Maw if he ever shows up, which hopefully he doesn't in your games. But if Twitch shows up, he's very good with Twitch. Just because that, or she is, because that extra attack speed is so nice. And Pix is very good with champions that stack a lot of attack speed. So she's still okay in some matchups, but I wouldn't blind pick her. Neeko, I'm gonna make a separate video about Neeko. I just want to wait for another day or two and just see her in some more games so I can get a feel for like what works on her. I did prepare a page. I've got her down at tier 3. She may not even be in the top 15. I don't know. I mean, she could be as high as tier 1, but like my reservations about Neeko really quickly because I don't want to spend a ton of time on it. First of all, I haven't seen her a lot, so I don't know for sure what's going on. A couple of other things that are concerning is she only has 21 armor. So I think she's going to get like just blasted in the laning phase. Low mana regen, so she doesn't scale very well with Fairy Charms at all. Remember, Fairy Charm is 25% of your mana. So when you have things like Sona and Nami that have 11.5 base mana regen, they're going to get a lot more value out of Fairy Charms than Neeko is. So that's a major issue. She doesn't appear to scale very well with Spell Pin. So something like a Leandri's doesn't look like it'd be as good on her because she doesn't have additional base damages. So she doesn't have Brand's Burn. She doesn't have the plant damage. All she has are just her base spells with AP scaling. And so that almost always bodes poorly for a bot lane mage. Usually it has to be someone who has extremely high base damages that does not need a lot of AP because you're not going to have enough money for it. As I said, you're already really poor as an AP support, right? When you have to get your Sork boots and then a 3,000 gold item, you damn well better be very strong on a single item power spike because you're not getting much more than that in a lot of games. So that's one thing just structurally that concerns me, that is why you don't see a lot of other mages bot lane like Orianna or just these other types of mages that don't have strong base damages. So that's number one, why I'm a little concerned about her. Number two, she doesn't have any plus healing and shielding, which is a major issue. She does have CC, but it's conditional, right? Like if you just hit one person, it's only a 0.5 second stun, which is not that long. Yeah, if you throw it through minions, you get some extra. I guess you get the 0.7 when it's on an allied an ally, but you have to choose between your stun and your E and your Q. So your Q is what does most of the damage, and it does a lot of damage. The Q, you know, on a champion, if they're like rooted or they have to stand still, that's 500 base damage with a 0.9 ratio. That's a lot of damage. 7-second cooldown's pretty manageable too, and 800 is pretty good range. So this is good. This is good like damage. It just doesn't have any utility on it, and they have to stand still. So if you just tap them with this, it's still pretty good damage. So this is good. Like this is strong. Q is strong for sure. This is like nice. You know, she does have 550 attack range, which is very good. A lot of mages only have 525, or some mages do. But yeah, this empowered auto, and it looks like you can just attack the minions twice, and then do your third attack on a champion. So you get an extra 50 damage. So she has a really nice trading pattern, and there's no cooldown on that either, from what I can tell. She looks pretty safe. You get this burst of speed. You can throw people off, you know, with your clone and things like that. So that does look really nice. The E is like, looks pretty good, you know, as far as I can tell. She's only been in my games like once over the last couple of days. Once or twice. Her ult looks very powerful. 90-second cooldown is very strong. AoE, lots of damage. 1.25 second stun. I don't know the radius. Okay, it's 600 radius. That's 1,200 diameter. Pretty strong. So we'll just see. It's like, I'm not sure the items or the runes that you take on her, though. I guess you could take Comet, but you don't have a lot of stuff that can hold people still. You've got your E, So maybe it's Comet, Mana Flow, Absolute Focus could be okay, but you're going to get, like, beaten up probably by Nami and Sona in lane. I don't think you're going to have all-in kill threat. I mean, maybe, like, if you have a Jhin on your team and Jhin hits them with a W so that you can actually, like, hit them with a couple of ticks off of your Blooming Bust, that can be very strong. So, I mean, we'll see. We'll see. It's just that's my reservations. I'm not sure what to get on her. I think she needs a mana item because her base mana is so low and she's not going to get Fairy Charm stuff. So, you know, I thought maybe like you could go for something like a Glacial Augment build. Then you can auto attack and that's going to give you a better chance to land your root. Then you could get Footwear Biscuit, Cosmic Insight, and then Mana Flow Transcendence. Maybe it's better just to go Comet. Like I said, just to go Comet, Mana Flow, Absolute Focus, and then something like Gathering Storm. Then as your secondary, go Footwear, Cosmic Insight. That's the other build that could be decent. My problem with that is like Absolute Focus just feels bad because it feels like you're gonna get knocked below 70%. You can go Transcendence as well, which is all right. If you go with this build, you can get a GLP early. I would just prefer GLP to Ludens on her, just because I think you're gonna be able to get close enough with your ultimate to hit people with a bunch of those ice shards, and that would slow people down. And you could get Twin Shadows as a secondary item, which would have really good utility in a team fight. You can slow everyone down and then run in invisible and like ult them all. So I feel like the Twin Shadows might be the way to go. Like it's very efficient. It also allows you to scout so you don't get killed while you're trying to ward. So like your ability to slow people down and then have mobility boots, create a clone, and then run in and ult people and get kills that way, I think is really nice catch potential. So, I mean, Glacial might be cute, but the fact that you can trigger it off of 550 attack range and that'll allow you to land your root with your E and then get extra damage off of your Q. I mean, I think it has decent synergy in the laning phase. And just Comet, Ares so bad you don't have shields. Comet seems bad because it's hard to hold people still unless you land your root. And those are really your only options, I think, are Comet, Airy, or something like Glacial Augment. So I think Glacial might be worth trying. I don't know. Maybe it's just bad. Maybe Comet's better. But that's what I think. Like I said, once I see her in action, maybe play her a couple of times, I'll come up with like a more formal evaluation of her. I know a lot of people are like, why don't you do something like that earlier? It's like, because I want to give you good information. I don't want to be the first person. I want to be the best person in terms of giving you sort of an analysis of a champion. And I just need more experience. I need to see it more. But I'll come up with more soon. Okay, that's going to be it for this very long tier list. There are some other honorable mentions that are worth talking about, you know, but I'll abridge it a little bit. You can ask me on stream if you want to know more. Just really quickly, Zillion has risen in sort of win rate lately. I'm not sure what's up with that. I still think that champions like Nami and Sona are better, but he is pretty good against assassins. Maybe that's why. Maybe Lulu's fallen out of favor too much, but he can work. It's okay. He's not, like, terrible. I just think there are better choices a lot of the time. Vel'Koz is a really good pocket pick against something like Zyra or Brand mid lane mages. You have really nice harass with your Q. You have a really good ult. You do have that sort of innate, like, high base damage because of your passive. Like I mentioned earlier, that's really important for a mage if you play him in the bot lane with your organic deconstruction, the true damage. So he's pretty good, especially if you have like tanks on your team or just somebody who can engage and hold people still while you channel your ult. I think he can actually be pretty good. So I wouldn't first pick him, but if you want to pick him into something like Zyra or Brand, I think he can be a good choice. Morgana's okay. Black Shield's okay. I just think that like the runes and items that are very good right now aren't great on her. Fiddlesticks is all right. I do think that he is pretty nice if you can afford to go something like maybe Electrocute plus Ulti Hunter and Presence of Mind for more ults. That's an interesting build. You could still try Dark Harvest and just harass with your crows in lane to maybe get that going. So Fiddle's still okay. I just don't think he's as lane dominant. He can get like annihilated by something like Brand or Zyra in the laning phase. So he's all right. Brand, very strong. A lot of people have Brand at tier 1. The only reason I have him down that low is I just think Zyra's better in every situation, pretty much. And so there's just not ever a reason to play Brand unless Zyra's banned. But if I was playing just based on like who are the strongest champions, period, Brand would probably be tier 1 or tier 2. It's just that Zyra replaces him. So there's just no reason to play him, I think. So that's why I have Brand lower. Although you can definitely win with him. I just think that Zyra's better. Tom Kinch, certain situations, if you're duo queued with the jungler, he can work, but overall pretty rough. Bard, as always, pretty rough. Not great items, not great runes. Cool to play. Gonna get dumpstered by most other champs unless you're just awesome on Bard. And if you're that awesome on Bard, you could be gaining a lot more elo playing something else, I think. But if you love Bard, you know, you can make it work. It's just hard to roam right now because if you roam, your AD carry is going to fall behind. And if they fall behind, they could get pushed in and lose plates on the tower. So that's always a rough thing in solo queue, is having to roam to get your chimes as Bard and just counting on your AD carry not to die. That's a tough bet a lot of times. Karma, pretty bad. I think that Nami and Sona are just way better pretty much always. They just scale way better off the popular items. They are reworking Karma soon, so stay tuned for that. Hopefully she'll get a bit more powerful. I know a lot of people love her on the channel. She's just kind of in a rough spot right now. Tarek, going to get dumpstered in lane. He's good in team fights. I don't know what else to say there. Like, his itemization is still, like, okay, but I just think he's been nerfed too much. You know, Sona or Nami or Soraka, all these champions are just going to blow him out of the water later, I think. But, you know, you can still win with him. Vhagar, cute pick. If they ever get a Quicksilver Sasher or Mikhail's, you're going to get dumpstered. I think you're going to get run over by things like Brand, Zyra, stuff like that in lane. Pretty good against some picks like Rakan, maybe Thresh. Like these kind of engaged champions. He can be decent disengaged, but kind of rough out there. And then Shin, I just wouldn't play him after Banner of Command got removed from the game. Some people still occasionally pick him, but like a lot of the other melee champs, he's just going to get bulldozed. Okay, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. If you enjoyed the content, be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out a ton. Tell your friends, you know, write it on forums, whatever. If you want people to have actual deep analysis, you want people to find that, you know, help me out with the visibility if you enjoy the content. And come check out the stream. You know, it starts around 9:30 p.m. most nights. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. It's a good, friendly, chill, fun community. You know, it's a good time, so come check it out. Otherwise, that's going to be it. Have a good day. I'll see you next time.